Okay, well, welcome everyone to today's talk. My name is Patrick Usher. I'm an MECFS patient, and today I'm going to be talking about nutrition. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about an evolutionary framework for understanding it. And we're going to be having an imaginary hunter-gatherer going around Tesco to make the various points. So let's just get straight into it. As a species, Homo sapiens, we have been around for 200,000 years. So for 95% of our evolution, we actually lived as hunter-gatherers. You know, we think of things like ancient Greece or the Middle Ages as things that happened a long time ago, but that's all just a blink of an eye in terms of the big human story. And most of our history is prehistory. It's not really recorded, and we were not living in societies as we now think of them, but in small nomadic groups. And we would go around in the seasons, and we lived in a very different way to now. And oftentimes, nowadays, we think that we have made a huge amount of progress in comparison to life 20, 30,000 years ago. We think of all our skyscrapers and airplanes and medical interventions that we can now do. And we often dismiss so-called pre-civilized life. I don't like using that term, but that's how we often think of it. And some people say, oh, back then people just had miserable lives, they were brutish and short. Now, it is true that in hunter-gatherer times, they did suffer from acute illness. And they suffered from acute illnesses more than we do, and they didn't have the means to deal with them. So if they lost a leg, that was probably it. If a tiger ate them, that was it. So, you know, acute infection, infant mortality, these were problems. But they had a big advantage over us in another way. Amongst hunter-gatherer groups, chronic mental and degenerative illnesses were basically non-existent. Maybe a little bit, but they were dramatically less than now. And so we have to ask ourselves, what were they doing that we're not? Can we actually learn from how they lived to improve our own health now? And so this is the question that I often ask myself is, can we actually have a foot in both worlds? Can we have the benefits of modernity, but think about where we've come from and reflect on the lessons from prehistory about how we can actually live healthier lives? Now, you may ask quite reasonably, Patrick, you know, you're saying these people 20,000 years ago were much healthier than us in many ways. How do you know that? Have they not all died out? And the answer is they haven't. There are still to this day hunter-gatherer groups living essentially as they always have been. They're just far less than they ever used to be, and they're under all kinds of pressures. But, you know, over the last 150 years, there have been anthropologists who have gone to live with these groups, you know, and learn their ways and customs, see what they eat, study their health. And it's thanks to that kind of work that we've been able to find out that these people do not suffer from the kinds of illnesses we have. And in fact, as long as they don't die from an acute reason, these people live into their late 70s, 80s in good health. They die of old age, basically. And so some of the books that I'm basing this talk on are like the one on the left, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price. He was a man who went around in the early 20th century, lots of different tribes, and he's studying their health. Again, they were in excellent health all around the world. Also, they had great teeth, as you can see from the picture. They never brushed their teeth, these tribes, never brushed their teeth, but they never had teeth issues. And then another book I'm basing the talk on is Food and Western Disease by Staffan Lindeberg, who studied tribes in the Pacific. And again, he found the same pattern as Weston A. Price. So the aim of the talk is to suggest a framework for how to think about food in an evolutionarily appropriate way. I'm not being dogmatic here. I'm not saying eat this and don't eat that. This is a framework. We all have to make our own decisions. and is supposed to have, make better choices in relation to health over the long term. Now, I must give you a warning. The framework that I'm giving you today is different from the view that you will get in standard nutrition. It's even different from what your doctor will tell you. But when you think about diet from an evolutionary perspective, a very different pattern about what might be conducive to health emerges than what we are often taught today. Okay, so here's our hunter-gatherer, and he's going to go to Tesco, and what we're going to do is he's going to go around the shop, and we're going to see what would he buy, what would he not buy, and why would he make those decisions. Now, our hunter-gatherer is generic because there is no one hunter-gatherer tribe or no one hunter-gatherer diet. The diets of hunter-gatherers largely depend upon the environment in which they lived, because you can only eat what's available, ultimately. So, for example, on the left here, you have a photo of the Hadza tribe from Tanzania, and their diet is, roughly speaking, 50% plant and 50% meat or animal products. On the right, you have the Inuit tribe living all the way up in the Arctic. There are no plants in the Arctic, so the diet of the Inuit is 100% carnivore, and actually they're very well. So it depends. The environment depends on the diet, but nevertheless, there are certain principles that you can pick out from how hunter-gatherers, from what they eat. Okay, so our hunter-gatherer goes into Tesco. The first thing to say is 80% of what's in the shop is off the menu. All processed food is out. The hunter-gatherer is only interested in real food, whole food. So crisps and biscuits, anything that might be in a packet, a lot of things that have additives and E-numbers, things that were essentially never meant to be in the human digestive tract. They're simply not on the menu. Even things like seed oils. Some experts now, they tend to be shouted down, but seed oils, a highly processed food, which actually can cause a lot of harm, according to some, and I would personally agree with them. So all of these things are not going to be bought by the hunter-gatherer. So what is he going to go for first? What's his main priority? Now, the man on the screen right now is an actual chief from the Hadza tribe in Tanzania. And I actually saw an interview of this very gentleman. There was a YouTuber who went to live with this tribe, and he asked the chief this very philosophical question. What's the most important thing in life? Now, we may have our own answers to that, like family, relationships, making a difference, whatever. But he came back without any hesitation and said the most important thing in life is meat. And so the first place that our hunter-gatherer is going to go is to the meat section. Because remember, these people, they're hunters. And as tribes, they're always looking out for when's the next time they're going to get their kill, because this is a time then that they can eat up and get a lot of nutrition. So they're always excited about that, and they give thanks when they can successfully hunt. So he goes to the meat section first. And here we have a typical meat section in a modern supermarket. But you might think that actually he'd be happy with what he sees. After all, he doesn't have to gut or kill the animal. That's a bit of a bore. He doesn't have to do that. But actually, our hunter-gatherer is not happy with what he sees. And he's not happy for two reasons. And I wonder if you can think what they might be to yourself. The first reason he's not happy is that in the process of preparing this meat for sale, much of the fat has been cut off. So hunter-gatherers are primarily fat hunters. We are seeking calories as human beings because we have to survive and we have to have energy to function. Fat is the #1 source of energy. It's over twice as effective at providing energy than carbohydrates. And in particular, the human body actually gets most energy from the very fat that we are told not to eat, which is what we see on this rack of lamb here, the saturated fat. I said I'd be saying things that would be different from what the doctor says. Of course, follow your doctor's advice if you want to, but You can also follow the advice of the Hadza. So from the point of view of what our hunter-gatherer is looking for, he wants the fat. And I have read accounts of people who've gone to live with hunter-gatherer groups where they kill an animal and the people eat the fat, the fatty parts of the meat around the ribs, and they cut off the muscle meat, which is not fatty, and they give it to the dogs because it's less valuable. Whereas what we do nowadays is we sell the muscle meat and we assume that this fat is going to give us a heart attack. The other point is fat is also life. Every single cell in your body is made out of cholesterol. Every single one. The membrane is made out of cholesterol. It is made out of what you see here on this rack of lamb. So our hunter-gatherer is seeking this first and foremost. Now, there are different views about cholesterol. I'm not going to say which one is right or wrong, but there are some experts now who present a different view from the standard one, such as that by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick here, who wrote the book, The Great Cholesterol Con, The Truth About What Really Causes Heart Disease and How to Avoid It. And he makes the argument in this book that cholesterol does not actually cause the problem. The problem is caused by damage to the blood vessels from other sources. So if the blood vessels get damaged by alcohol, by sugar, by seed oils, then there are little holes develop in the blood vessels. Then, simply by accident, as it were, the cholesterol goes into those damaged areas, and then it builds up. But it's not just building up as a matter of course. And so if you're not eating seed oils and sugar in excess and alcohol, the argument in this book is cholesterol will not actually cause heart disease. So there are different arguments about this. Okay, let's go back to the meat. I said there was a second thing that he's not happy about. And again, I wonder if you can think what it might be. And it is that there are no organs on display. So hunter-gatherers, when they killed an animal, ate it from nose to tail. They did not waste any part of the animal. And even in more recent history, in Ireland and many countries, people would eat organs, but it's less common nowadays. So organs have an extraordinary nutrient profile, and so they would not have been wasted. One quick example is eating heart. So some of you may be on a supplement called CoQ10, which is often recommended for ME/CFS patients. It's also recommended for heart failure patients. CoQ10 actually helps the heart to beat more quickly, to beat more strongly. The greatest natural occurring source of CoQ10 is found in heart. So when someone actually eats heart, they improve their own heart function. So there's a like with like component to eating organs. Okay, so that's the first thing our hunter-gatherer is actually looking for. Meat, nose to tail, ideally fatty meat. And he's very disappointed not to find it, so he's gone off and wagged his spear at the manager and said, you better get it in for next time. Now, if our hunter-gatherer is near the ocean or near rivers, he will, of course, also fish. And some hunter-gatherers have incredible fishing skills. They can dive under the water for many minutes in order to get the fish they need. So fish is on the menu. Sticking with animal products, eggs. I don't know what the latest advice is on eggs, but often we're told, you know, what is it, eat 4 eggs a week or something, maximum. They're always changing their mind. But eggs are a favorite hunter-gatherer food, particularly the yolks. So the white of an egg is not actually very nutritious. It's only there to protect the yolk. The yolk is what will become the hen, the chicken. And so it's very common, hunter-gatherer, they're going along, they find a nest of eggs. They will actually open up the eggs and suck out the yolk. And they could have 10 at once. It's no problem to them. So eggs are a favorite source of energy and they're extremely nutritious. Now we come to milk and cheese. This is a controversial topic with different views. And I don't know if I've got a clear answer on this. But we ultimately have to remember that milk and cheese are a growth formula for the young of other species. So it's something that the cow creates for their calf, and it's only something the calf is meant to have when they're young. As such, milk and cheese have various inflammatory compounds, like lactose, whey, and casein that some humans find difficult to digest. Butter is the least inflammatory dairy product because it's just basically the fat, so the inflammatory proteins have been taken out. My own view on this is that the vast majority of hunter-gatherer tribes would probably not have had milk and cheese. Because they were nomadic, they didn't have the kind of settled life or settled society that allows for keeping of cattle and the making of cheese. So my impression is most groups probably did not have milk and cheese. However, there are some pastoralist tribes who did keep and do keep cows and who would drink their milk. I can't come down on it too strongly one way or another, but my feeling is probably not. Staying on animal products, this is an animal product that we might not think of as one. Honey. Honey is the ultimate hunter-gatherer treat. The Hadza tribe they actually get up to 20% of their calories from honey. And they will happily climb up trees, like you see in the picture on the left here, and they will brave the stings of the bees in order to get their hit, right? So this sugar addiction goes back a long way, but in order to get their hit, they will do that, and they love honey. It is a constant across hunter-gatherer groups. And so I think the idea of this treat is a good segue for us to think about our own conceptions of treats. And I know I said all processed food is out and I wouldn't be talking about it, but I am going to talk about chocolate because, well, sure, don't we all like chocolate? And, we have to deal with it, right? It has to be talked about. And we'd want to think that chocolate is surely a yes. But of course, certainly this kind of milk chocolate here, it's not a yes, it's not on the menu. It's a processed food. But what I wanted to use chocolate as an example to introduce an interesting idea about why it is that we are often so easily addicted to things like milk chocolate, brownies, biscuits, and cakes. Why does this happen? And people often say, "Oh, yeah, I'm a sugarholic. I can't stop myself," But if it were only about the sugar, and it is partly about the sugar, but if it were only about the sugar, would we not be addicted to fruit? Would we not be addicted to bananas, like this man here, who actually is addicted to bananas, but he's the exception rather than the rule? It's not just about the sugar. The reason we find these things so addictive is because they contain both sweet and fat at the same time. The combination of sweet and fat does not exist in the natural world. It is totally something that we have constructed ourselves. Our brains are looking for energy. We are looking to survive all the time. This is what life is about, right? We're in the savannah, we've got to survive. When we now eat a Cadbury's Dairy Milk, our brain thinks, my God, that's the most amazing way of surviving I've ever encountered. It's this extraordinary combination of sweet and fat. And so this may actually be the reason why we get so easily hooked onto these kinds of things, because it ties in with survival. And some experts actually think that even things like binge eating disorders, where people are eating lots and lots of cake or chocolate at once, is actually that the survival parts of their brains have actually been hijacked by these foods. Okay, so that's milk chocolate, but what about dark chocolate? We are often told it's a superfood. Would this be on the menu? And I have to tell you that I quite like dark chocolate. So what I'm about to share with you is, it's not great news for myself either, okay? But we're told it's a superfood and so on. But is it really? One thing that I've noticed with dark chocolate is if I have a fair bit of it at once, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 squares, I often don't feel very well. I actually feel like my heart is beating more quickly. I feel like my nervous system is more on edge, and I feel nauseous. And I wonder if anyone here has had a similar experience. And the reason that that actually happens, I'm going to share with you now. And maybe when I first tell you, you will think it crazy, or I'm making it up, or it can't be true. But it actually basically is true. The reason people can feel poorly when they eat too much dark chocolate is the chocolate's trying to kill you. Okay, I've got a little square here with a machine gun just to make the point. But as strange as this sounds, it's actually basically true. And I'm now going to unpack why. I want you to think about life from the perspective of chocolate. You know, we like to think about chocolates just for us, right? But no, chocolate's coming from a living thing. Chocolate comes from the cocoa bean tree. On screen right now, you have the cocoa bean tree. This is what chocolate really looks like. You've got the cocoa beans in these kind of purpley things here. What does the cocoa bean tree care about in life? Does it care about us? No. It only cares about two things. It cares about its own survival and the survival of its offspring. And just like any living thing, it will fight to protect itself, and it will fight to protect its offspring. Now, it can't do it with claws and teeth, but it has developed, thanks to evolution, its own way of fighting back against attack. And it does that by using something called defense chemicals. So I'm using chocolate as a way into a really important topic, defense chemicals, plant defense chemicals. These are actually within the cocoa bean itself. They're little substances that are released by the cocoa bean when it senses it is under attack. So one example is theobromine, it's a defense chemical. So for example, let's say you're a deer and you're wandering around the forest and you come across the cocoa bean tree and you eat some. The defense chemicals will make you feel so ill as that deer that you will never, ever, ever want to have it again. And in that way, the cocoa bean ensures its evolutionary survival. You may have heard that chocolate can make a dog really sick. In fact, that chocolate can kill a dog. This is why. Here's an example of a dog who was very ill after eating some Christmas chocolate coins, and he had to undergo life-saving surgery. He didn't eat very much, but he was very ill. And that's because of the defense chemicals. And a dog's liver is not capable of detoxifying the defense chemicals in chocolate as well as our liver is. And that's why it's so dangerous for dogs, also for bears. Now, there is a lethal dose of dark chocolate for humans, but you'd have to eat an awful lot of it in order to actually get killed. For dogs, not so much. But this nevertheless shows how serious these defense chemicals are. They can take a life. It's the same story with coffee. If you've ever wondered, why does drinking coffee make you feel jittery, make you feel on edge, make your heart race? It's because the caffeine, that's actually a defense chemical. It's actually attacking you as you drink it. And it's quite ironic that people get addicted to having 8 cups of coffee a day when actually that coffee is just trying to kill them all day long. That's basically what happens. What about almonds? Almonds also have defense chemicals in them. In fact, they have one that you've heard of already, cyanide. So there's a tiny amount of cyanide within almonds. Now, the kinds of almonds that people buy in the shops have rather little cyanide, but it's still there. There are other varieties of almonds in the wild where only eating 50 of them would kill a human being. So maybe you're wondering, what's the upshot of all of this? Basically, all plants, With the exception of fruit, we will come to fruit. All plants, vegetables, legumes, beans, seeds, and nuts have defense chemicals to some degree. Now, beans, nuts, seeds, and legumes, those are all technically seeds, and they are the most heavily defended plants. And that makes sense because the plant will wish to protect the most important parts of it. The seed is the most important part for the next generation. That's what becomes the next generation. So that's why seeds are most protected. That's why they're most toxic. So all of these things, they have these defense chemicals. Now, of course, they also have nutritional value. They also have compounds that are healthy. These are not purely poisonous things, otherwise we just keel over. But they have both aspects. They have nutritional value and they have the defense chemicals. Think of a seed. Isn't it amazing that can, it has the amazing qualities within it to become a tree. So it has amazing positive qualities, but it also has to protect itself if it's going to get its job done. So it's a double-edged sword. Let's move on a bit more to vegetables, having been talking about seeds. Onions and garlic are a fantastic example of plant defense chemicals. What happens when you cut an onion? You actually start to cry. You actually have your eyes stinging. And, for many years, I just thought that's just the way it is. But I never asked myself, why does it happen? And it happens because the onion is attacking you. It's actually telling you to back off. And what's so amazing about it is that it releases these defense chemicals the moment the knife goes in. Not a second before, not a second after. It releases them when you put the knife in. Because what we know now is that plants in general, beg your pardon, plants in general can actually sense. So the onion actually senses the moment it's being attacked, and it sends out the chemicals. When you eat a raw onion, it burns your throat and it burns your stomach. Those are the defense chemicals doing their job. They're trying to make it so unpleasant to eat an onion that you will never, ever consider doing it again. It's the same with garlic, raw garlic. It actually burns you. Those are the chemicals. So look, there are quite a few different defense chemicals. And some of these you will have heard of already. I'm giving you some of the more common ones. Oxalates. These are found in a lot of leafy green vegetables, like spinach. These damage cellular function. They leach calcium from the bones, causing osteoporosis. They can cause crystal-like deposits in the organs. Lectins, which interfere a lot with digestion, even breaking down the wall of the small intestine, causing leaky gut, interfering with the absorption of nutrients, and contributing to brain illness. Glucosinolates, which are in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, which interfere with thyroid function, can actually damage the thyroid, causing it to swell, which is a condition called goiter. So these are all spread around in different plants. Just this morning, I read this paper published in a very reputable journal, the International Journal of Food Science. And it's called Naturally Occurring Plant Food Toxicants and the Role of Food Processing Methods in Their Detoxification. And this paper looked at the 5 most common plant defense chemicals, what plants they occur in, and what you can do to detoxify. I'm just going to read the conclusion because I think it's a really helpful way of thinking about plant defense chemicals. Plants serve as a major source of food for most living organisms. Of course, I can't actually see everything because of the videos, so I'm going to have to make a guess. Plants evolved defense mechanisms to protect themselves from attack by producing inherent chemicals known as secondary metabolites. These secondary metabolites, such as cyanogenic glycosides, one I can't make out there, glycoalkaloids, lectins, and pyrrolizidine alkaloids, are widely in most important plant foods, which include cassava, flaxseed, broccoli, rapeseed, chickpea, soybean, and lentil. They are beneficial for the plant itself, but toxic to other organisms, including human beings. Short and long-term exposure to significant amounts of these plant defense chemicals may end up leading to chronic irreversible health problems in important organ systems such as the immune system, kidneys, reproductive system, and in severe cases, they can be carcinogenic and fatal. Now, don't go away thinking that eating a carrot is going to kill you, but the point is that actually this does sometimes happen. Sometimes people are very ill. There's a story of someone who had a lot of kidney problems, very severe kidney problems, and he thought it would be a good idea to have a green smoothie. And the amount of oxalates in the spinach actually was too much for his kidneys, and he died. So these things do actually sometimes happen. So after all of that, you may well be asking, will our hunter-gatherer eat plants? And the answer is yes, he does eat plants and he does eat vegetables and he does eat nuts and he does eat seeds. But there are important qualifications to be made. And they are, number one, the importance of cooking. Cooking is so important for human evolution because the act of cooking, to a significant degree, destroys the defense chemicals. Now, it depends on the method of cooking chosen, the kind of plant you're dealing with. Some methods will destroy more defense chemicals, some will destroy less. It depends. But in essence, cooking is so important for the hunter-gatherer. They also developed, out of their own wisdom, other ways of neutralizing these defense chemicals by, for example, soaking the vegetables in different solutions to take out the toxins, grating or pounding them, sometimes for days. Fermentation. People often talk about the benefits of fermented food. Fermentation destroys defense chemicals. Drying the food and peeling the food, because often defense chemicals are more concentrated in the skin of a plant. For example, with a potato, there's more defense chemicals in the skin, which makes sense because the skin, from the potato's perspective, is the first line of defense. So these are the qualifications that our hunter-gatherer does in order to eat the plants more safely. But the other factor is they had extremely strong stomachs. These people were, very well in general, hunter-gatherers. They weren't eating processed foods, they weren't having medications, they weren't taking antibiotics. And we, in the modern world, our stomach actually gets damaged over time from these kinds of things. We develop conditions like leaky gut. Hunter-gatherers had a very strong gut wall, a very strong digestive system. So they were also much better equipped to be able to actually digest plants in a robust way. Okay, so that's nuts and seeds. Now let's come to fruit. I mentioned the story is different with fruit. This is the plant that wants to be eaten. Again, let's think about it from an evolutionary point of view. This is a peach tree right here. What does the peach tree want in life? Well, it wants to continue its offspring to the next generation. In this case, what the peach tree does is it produces something very sweet and attractive, in which there is its seed. It does not include many or only a tiny amount of defense chemicals, like negligible. In order that when we have, let's say, a deer again wandering around, that deer will come, eat the peach, including the seed, and it will go and poop that seed out somewhere else, and then you get a new peach tree. So this is an evolutionary tactic from the point of view of the peach tree. And it's the same with basically all fruit. Now, there's some fruit that's a bit more toxic, but basically, as a rule of thumb, fruit does not contain defense chemicals. It's better. It's much less complicated in terms of eating something. And compare the difference between eating a raw onion and eating a peach. Huge difference. So, in short, our hunter-gatherer will want to buy meat, particularly fatty meat, nose to tail, including organs. He will want eggs. He'll want fish. He'll want honey. He'll want fruit. And with a certain caveat in terms of how he prepares them, he will want vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And he will be ignoring everything else. Now, you may be wondering, what's the balance of meat to plant within the typical hunter-gatherer diet? or animal products in general. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this can really depend on location. The further north you go, the less plants there are, the more groups are just eating fully carnivorous diets. But this is a paper which looked at dietary variation across groups in tropical zones across the world. So in this case, there isn't such a seasonal constraint. It's called Comparing Measured Dietary Variation Within and Between Tropical Hunter-Gatherer Groups to the Paleo Diet. And it looked at about 15 tribes. And what it found is that as a rule of thumb, about 50% of calories came from plants and 50% from animal products. A lot of the tribes was like 60% of one and 40% of another, or 65 of one and 35 of another. There were some groups at extremes, like there's a tribe in Australia in this paper, which was 94% carnivorous. There's a tribe in Africa called the Bushmen, who are 90% plant. But in general, 50-50 is roughly a rule of thumb. And of course, it's also seasonal, because whereas nowadays we can go into a supermarket and we can get any fruit we like most of the year, in those days there was a fruit season and there was a plant season. So at some times of the year you would gorge on fruit. And at other times of the year, that wasn't available, so you were more hunting. It depended. So here's our evolutionary framework. Eat real food, not processed food. Number two, well-sourced and fresh meats, fish, and eggs are part of an evolutionarily appropriate diet. And I say well-sourced because there are problems with the way certain meats and fish are bred and raised these days. I also make the point fresh because there's a difference between fresh meat and processed meat. And remember that plants, with seeds being the most toxic and fruits being the least, have defense chemicals, to which some people can be somewhat or very sensitive. And so certain ways of cooking, detoxifying the plants can be really important, or even cutting certain plants out temporarily. So that's the framework. And as a final thought, here are three members of the Maasai tribe from Kenya. And I find it funny looking at these people because, you know, I'm chronically ill and I live in this world, like we all do, of airplanes and cars and social media and tax returns, etc. And it can feel like we're very far removed from these people. But in actual fact, we have been these people up until a blink of the eye in human history. And we are still these people. We've just forgotten it. And I think that maybe as a society, despite all our wonderful advances in many ways, which I wouldn't swap, it's a big mistake, I think, also to forget where we've come from. So thank you very much.